Yeah, this is the part where I'm supposed to come up with something intelligent sounding to say instead of just, "Hey, look what we made!" Anyway, I decided that it might be marginally beneficial to do some sort of a behind-the-scenes or special feature on creating the miniature that we used in My Word is My Bond. At this point, I actually haven't built it yet, so I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm being optimistic and assuming that it's going to turn out fairly well. But I figured, you know, if I may as well just talk everybody through the steps that I took to build this thing. So at the moment, it's not all that impressive looking. What we've got is a steel wire frame attached, actually just basically just hot glued down to a piece of board. And what I'm doing is creating the basic framework of the cave out of this steel wire. And the plan is then to use a finer wire to fill out the form a bit and then add the rock texture to it. I've actually finished with the main braces on this particular miniature, and I'm going in and I'm adding in some smaller gauge wire to help to strengthen the internal structure underneath it. And I might afterwards go in with an even thinner gauge wire and do some more, but as you can see, what we've got is this thinner gauge copper wire that is now being strung in between the heavier gauge wire. You know, I got the heaviest gauge as the supports right here. You got this thinner gauge, you got a thinner gauge here, and I may run some cross struts in a even thinner gauge. But if we pull out a bit, you can actually see this scale that I'm working at here. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I've never actually built anything this big before, and all the other stuff that I've built is, there's no light over there, you know, real little. But this is rather big. But the idea is when I put the camera like here and I, you know, shoot up into it, that the light will play off of it realistically enough and actually make a decent scene. Alright, so now we've moved on to the next phase of this particular miniature. What I'm doing at this point is I've created my wire framework, and now I'm actually taking a bark, just your garden variety big old bag of bark that you would use for landscaping, and what I'm doing is I'm gluing it onto the surface of the wire mesh. It's giving us this really nice rock-like texture. See over here I've got some gaps as I'm attaching it. Over here where it's more finished, you can see it's fairly seamless. By the way, it is an incredibly painstaking process. I never really want to see another piece of bark in my entire life once this particular project is done. And by the way, it's like 2 in the morning. I've lost sleep over this project. I think I'm starting to go loopy. For crying out loud, I'm talking to a camera that nobody's holding except me. That's what filmmaking does to you. You know, makes you just a little crazy. Just a little bit. I guess you could say, though, that this miniature's bark is most definitely worse than its bite. Now I'm making bad puns to the camera. I need sleep. Alright, so I finished gluing all the bark onto the wire frame, and the next step was then to go ahead and put a coat of primer over the entire surface. I have gone ahead and I've done that, and I've used just a plain old gray spray paint primer just because it applies much faster. And I've primered that to the whole surface. In addition to that, what I also did was took some of the modeling compound that I use for my bricks, and I just put this slight layer here that kind of blends the rocks into the ground. And then it's difficult to see, but I've also done just a little bit of texturing here so that when I finally paint it, you'll get more than just a flat color for the floor. I also ended up painting the wall over here as well. So now what I'm doing is adding in some of the details. You know, part of what makes a good miniature work is all the little tiny details you put in. In order for a miniature to be successful, you need to have stuff in there that the audience will associate with the scale that the miniature is at. If you have something in there that the audience knows how big it is, then it will instinctively help to sell the miniature in a way that the miniature itself couldn't. I mean, I've done tests with this. You can take a miniature that has no scale reference, you can
shrink a person down and stick them on there, but they'll end up looking like a little person on a miniature. You need something in there to sell the scale. So I've started to build some pieces here. Since this is a steampunk world, building a set of pipes right here, for example. They kind of go up into the ceiling. I may add a few more, but you gotta have pipes in steampunk. And, this here is the beginnings of Draga's cell that I'll use for some of the shots. And as you can see in here, I've built a little pallet bed. The plan will be to paint that. But there's, I did some texturing on the floor, so it looks like there's mud, and we'll paint that. I'll put some sort of little, make up a little fabric pallet, and a little tiny pillow and such, and put it on top of that to sell it. And I'm working on a tiny shelf here. I'm probably going to take some of the vials of the breathing apparatus liquid, make some micro vials of it, and stick it on there. But I'm just building in some additional details, just little things that'll be in there that will sell it. Just like with a lot of the things I do, including art and anytime I build stuff, this is just kind of coming to me, so I don't actually have a game plan at this point. I mean, I know roughly what's going to happen, but I don't actually know all the stuff I'm going to put. Once I have all the little details built, then I'll begin painting everything, and that is where things are going to get a little challenging. So now I'm kind of doing 2 steps at once right here. In addition to making more of the micro bricks and building them into the cell wall, I am also putting on another coat of paint onto the rocks. I've already put on the primer, I've put on the base coat of black for the deep crevices, I've put on the brown, and now I'm putting on a lighter brown, and I'm using a process called dry brushing. Dry brushing is basically where you get just a little bit of paint onto the brush, onto a dry brush, and you gently brush it over the surface texture. What will happen is on the raised areas you'll get a deposit of paint, but on the recessed areas you won't. What this does is it brings out the texture on whatever you're painting. In this case, I've got bark. It's got excellent texture. It's going to look like rocks. So what I'm going to do is build up these layers of dry brush, lighter stuff, onto the surface, and it's hopefully going to end up looking like rock. You can see where I've added more to the cell wall, and it's actually starting to look kind of like a cell. And honestly, I think that if you just put the camera here, you could almost believe that you're looking into a into a jail cell. As you can see, I've added more color to the rocks, and in my opinion, they're actually starting to look like a rock wall. I'm getting just a tiny, tiny bit of paint on the edge of my brush, which you can't see, and then taking it, this is the only part I haven't done yet, and I'm just gently brushing it across the surface. And so what you're getting is the light paint is being deposited, like I set up on those raised edges, and is not being deposited into the dark recesses. What this does is this kind of fools the camera into thinking that light is playing across this in a way that it's not. It's a technique that's used when you're building miniatures for wargame terrain, and I think that it will be fairly effective in film miniatures as well, but we'll have to see. Well, the model's finally finished, and I'll go ahead and I'll show you what it looks like. I've finished all of the painting on this particular model. As you can see, the rock is looking very realistic. I've even gone so far as to add torches on the wall that I can composite digital fire into. I've gone ahead and I've painted the pipes and the boiler, added some rough grit to the ground, even put a little thing for campfire if I need it. Over here along the cell wall, I have a pile of wood. I even have a shelf with some of the micro vials from the breathing collars. Over here we have the prison cell with the gate that just kind of hovers there, and inside we have the rather muddy interior. And as you can see, we even gone so far as to add a straw pallet on a very rough bed. As you can see, the whole place is quite dirty, in keeping with what we originally shot. And the amount of detail I've put in here is actually quite impressive. As you can see right there, they've even gone so far as to add in the scratches that prisoners have put in to count the number of days. An interesting note is that you notice that inside the cell looks like it's mud,
and out here it looks dry. The way that I achieved that was by very lightly brushing baby oil on top of the surface. Since baby oil is oil-based and these are acrylic paints, it won't actually interact. So the next step, of course, is to light our miniature. Basically what I did was I examined the shots and I figured out the lighting requirements. For example, in the majority of the shots, because of how I lit the green screen, I had two primary lights. I had a very strong light with kind of a bluer balance to represent daylight from the mouth of the cave coming from one side, and I had a warmer, yellower light representing more of the artificial light of the cave coming from the other side, and then I had a series of fill lights just to fill in the green screen. So we got fairly even light, but there's still some definition. So I tried to match that as close as possible with the way that I set up my lighting scheme. As you can see, I have kind of a bizarre 5-point light set up in order to duplicate this lighting. Over here I have a daylight bulb inside just one of these utility light holders, and it's got a piece of cloth over it to act as a diffuser. So this will simulate the bluish daylight coming in the side of the cave. And as you can see, it actually looks kind of like natural daylight coming in. On this side, I have a light with a yellow reflector behind it that will give a warmer light representing the light from the inside of the cave, the warmer light. Then I have a series of fill lights. I have a fill light here kind of coming in diagonally, representing one of the lights that I had on green screen. I also have another fill light coming in over the top, which is similar to another fill light. And then of course the fifth fill light is the series of light bulbs in my room. Which are all providing kind of just a wash of lighting. It's not going to look like this in the final footage because I'm using a different camera to film this than I am to film the actual film, but you're getting the idea. So what I did is I matched the lighting to the shot itself. Now the final step in this process was of course to shoot the shots that I needed. What I went ahead and I did is I loaded up my scenes on my iPod so that I can examine them frame by frame. And then what I do is, as you can see, I've got my camera right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and move the camera roughly into the position that the physical camera was in relation to the green screen, of course pretending that my people are now 5 inches tall as opposed to 5-6 feet tall. So for example, let's take this shot right here. It's not the best shot in the world, but I'll take an instant example. So as you can see, we're coming at the shot from, it's kind of a mid-range, mid shot for about the chest up, which means that in the real world the camera was about 5 feet off the ground, which means that in this world this needs to be about 5 inches off of the virtual floor. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, first off, make sure my camera is actually turned on, because that would be marginally helpful. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to position my camera as close as I can get it to the position that the physical camera was in the shot. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom out a bit here. Okay, now that's too wide, but this will help me to get the camera. So I'm going to raise the physical camera, up to roughly about 5 inches off the cave floor, as you can see there. And now I need to kind of dial the shot in, which can be difficult. So let's see if I can actually do this while showing you what I'm doing. It's a fairly boring shot, but that's actually almost exactly what would be behind me. I'm going to zoom in slightly, and I'll probably end up blurring the shot artificially in After Effects. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and start my camera here so that it's recording, and then I'm going to start the shot on my iPod so I know roughly how long it is. Now I'm going to stop this, and that will give me enough background footage to play with. And then after that, it's basically just repeat, step and repeat. I just keep moving the virtual camera into the various positions that it will be in the miniature, and I'll take those shots and I'll go ahead and I'll composite them in together, either in After Effects or in Premiere. I'm not sure which. Probably After Effects. It does a better job. It has more tools. A lot of people have actually asked me, or in the past they've asked me, why I would shoot something like this, a background image, with my video camera as opposed to simply taking a photograph. the reason, and I have a very nice photography camera, but the reason I choose to do it this way is because each camera kind of creates an image in its own way. They all have their own compression algorithms, their own color balance, and their own levels of noise, video noise. So by shooting it with the same camera under as close to the same f-stop and shutter speed, which is nearly impossible, but try to get marginally close, then I can hopefully make it feel like they were shot at the same time. So I'll put this in the background. If there's any shots that have torches in the background, I'll composite the digital flames in. I'll color correct everything, put my guy on top. I typically put a layer of additional noise over the top to bring everything together, and the shot will be done.